now we're going on to the questions that you submitted. Moving on, Travis H. asks, Dave, you brought up Frank Thorne while chatting with Kevin Eastman. It reminded me of an interview with Mr. Thorne in 2019. He mentions being a follower of Raymond, Foster, quote, and so forth, as opposed to being influenced by Ditko or Kirby. Okay, I'm gonna go through Travis's whole question, whole post, and then we'll talk about it. One of the quotes is, "My stuff on Perry Mason was mostly Raymond swipes," unquote. Do you have any thoughts about swiping influential artists as a method to better learn the craft of comics? Do you have a favorite issue or strip by Frank Thorne? Okay. First of all, I have to say, in trying to find the information on this, because I knew what I wanted to talk about, it's amazing where Frank Thorne doesn't show up. Like the World Encyclopedia of Comics doesn't mention name slips my mind. The Guy Bennett, the Guy Bennett MD strip that he did. He worked on. He did the drawing on Perry Mason, and did all of this work for DC and Gold Key, and Frank Thorne isn't mentioned, and none of those things are mentioned in the World Encyclopedia of Comics. I end up always having to go to my paper-bound Art of Frank Thorne fanzine, and the essay that his daughter Wendy wrote back in 1978, 1980, when the Red Sonja thing was in full swing. And so if it's not too much trouble for people, if there are Frank Thorne interviews that are starting to surface where he does talk about Alex Raymond, I would be very, very interested in those parts of the discussion, because this leads into something that I haven't been able to find, which is that, by way of explanation, Frank Thorne started drawing the Perry Mason comic strip for King Feature Syndicate in 1951, which makes him one of the earliest of the Alex Raymond clones, and he was definitely an Alex Raymond clone. When you're looking at Frank Thorne's Perry Mason strips, you're looking at really, really bad Alex Raymond Rip Kirby, and you can see, I can see different faces, different compositions and stuff that are actually definitely lifted from Alex Raymond, and Frank Thorne would have been the first to admit lifted really badly. And Frank Thorne had told me the story, or I had read the story, and I don't know which of those two it is, where he had gone to a National Cartoonist Society meeting when he was doing Perry Mason, and enthusiastically rushed up as the world's biggest Alex Raymond Rip Kirby fanboy, obviously because he's making his living trying to make Perry Mason look as much like Rip Kirby as he can, and enthusing, and Alex Raymond cut him dead, which is one of those that's very, very rare that a cartoonist would even tell that story on himself, because it must have been the most devastating moment of his professional life. To that point, 1951, he was in his 20s, I guess, and to be cut dead by by Alex Raymond, who just obviously took a very, very dim view, first of all, of people swiping his work for a living, as opposed to the same thing he did. Just you pick up something here, something there, but worst of all, doing it badly, so that it made him look bad, which is be careful for what you wish for, because Stan Drake is coming up ahead 2 years, and he's not doing you, and he's not doing it badly, and that's going to be a gut punch for you. So there's a very, very limited spectrum of Frank Thorne material that I've got. I've got his autobiographical strip that he did in the Streetwise collection for Two Moros. I've got his autobiographical graphic novel, but that's mostly teenage and adolescent. There's anything in there about being a cartoonist or being a professional cartoonist. I don't remember it. Is there an essay in it? It was published by Fantagraphics, but I think it's mostly about music and the music that he liked, and if I'm not mistaken, the music that he played. So, I don't really have time to. I wish I had time to listen to an hour and a half Frank Thorne interview, or read a 75-page Frank Thorne interview. What I'm interested in is what he had to say about Alex Raymond specifically, and where the anecdote is of him beating Raymond and being cut dead at the National Cartoonist Society meeting. And if there's no great rush on it, but if anybody knows where they've got a Frank Thorne interview, as you do, Travis, with wherever you found this interview online, I don't know if it was a print interview or an audio-visual interview. Either one, I would definitely appreciate. This is what he specifically had to say about Raymond, about Perry Mason, and about his swipes. Moving on to, do you have any thoughts about swiping influential artists as a method to better learn the craft of comics? Well, yeah. I definitely think it's a great idea, as you can see from the conversation that I'm having with Kevin Eastman. He's in the same boat. We're magpie cartoonists. We look at what other cartoonists are doing and going, that's a really, really effective way to do that. I would never have come up with that on my own in a million years. But I just love that you're doing, and I want to do that. Not my version of it, but trying to copy you as faithfully as I possibly can. For those of us in that category, like me and Kevin, Rich Buckler, there's a whole bunch of us. That's a good 50% of the fun of writing and drawing comics is doing that. Wow, it's not the absolute worst Neil Adams version that anybody's ever done, which is the most that I can say about my Papa Balloon and Cactus cover. What Neil Adams would have thought, that would have been interesting. If you gave Neil Adams a list of the Neil Adams clones and asked him to put them in order, who's the best and who's the worst, I would hope that I would not be at the bottom of the list, but I'd probably be pretty close to the bottom of it. For guys who aren't that way, like Neil Adams, apart from the fact that he did lift Stan Drake style, went, okay, Jalot 290 pen nib, John Stone and Cushing illustration style. I'm going to branch off from there, but definitely that's what I'm grounded in. And the same thing with Bill Sienkiewicz. It's all their drawing. It's all their thinking. And thinking that is just orders of magnitude above anything that I'm capable of when I'm doing illustration. Steve Ditko, who definitely started out, riffing on Mort Miskin, and Jerry Robinson was one of his mentors, and he developed his own style within the confines of a lot of their storytelling thinking, but pretty much overnight became Steve Ditko. And Steve Ditko always looked like Steve Ditko, and he was never swiping other people's drawings or stealing other people's layouts, which is why it's interesting that he remained friends with Wally Wood. Probably one of the few professionals that Ditko was genuinely a friend of, because Wally Wood was, this is why he had assistants. Go through the swipe file, find me a Stan Drake girl's face that looks like this, lightbox it onto the page, and then I'll ink it and make it look like Wally Wood. And completely opposite, and something that Steve Ditko professionally found abhorrent, but he was just in another category that way. I don't know how many other Magpie artists would be this way. I personally definitely revere the guys where everything does come out of their own head. This is how I draw people. I'm just drawing. I sit down at the drawing board and draw. I don't sit down at the drawing board and riff, which is what I do. I draw until it starts looking like somebody, and then I start riffing on that person. Oh, this looks like an Al Williamson thing, so then I start riffing on Al Williamson. Or, wow, this looks like Jeff Jones. So I start riffing on Jeff Jones because that's how I see, and that's a big part of the pleasure that I get out of it. Last part of Travis's question: do you have a favorite issue or strip by Frank Thorne? I would have to say issue 137 or 140 of Son of Tomahawk, May, June 1972, which I looked up in Overstreet because I know that it was a Son of Tomahawk job that I saw by Frank Thorne that made me write to him, care of Marvel Comics, and ask would he be willing to do an interview with me by mail. And it was an all handwritten interview. We went back and forth a couple of times, and it's gone. It never ran in Comic Art News and Reviews, and or if it did, only excerpts of it did it in my back alley report. And it was when I looked it up in Overstreet, Frank Thorne only drew 2 issues of Son of Tomahawk. The last one, issue number 140, May, May-June 1972 in issue 137. So I'm pretty sure it's number 140. And I think the reason that he wrote back to me, because he was just one of the journeyman guys. He was the guy working in the Joe Kubert style. It wasn't Joe Kubert or Russ Heath, and closer to Joe Kubert than to Russ Heath. But really, really an amazingly talented guy from the perspective that he would pencil and ink the story and letter it. He could do lettering that would pass muster at DC or Marvel, and he would do the coloring. And I'm pretty sure he did the coloring on number 140, although I haven't seen it for 50 years. And I think he was, as the British say, re-chuffed to hear from a comic book fan about Son of Tomahawk, because it was the last issue of the title. It was probably just given to him for that reason. It's like, we're getting ready to cancel this. Frank Thorne, you want to do the last issue of this? Here's the script. And it's like, that's not one of those things that you're going to be including in your QV as a cartoonist. And it's not one of those things that tells you that you're very high in the pecking order at DC when you're given a last issue of something just to close it off. So he actually sent me a Guy Bennett original that I don't have anymore, and did the interview with me and answered questions. And this was 1972, May, June. Coincidentally, that was June 16, 17 was the weekend of the Watergate break-in. Also the weekend that Richard and Wendy Peeney got married, and the weekend of the Southern Ontario Comic Art Festival, where I met D. Casey Brennan for the first time. And it turns out, rereading Wendy Thorne's introduction to the art of Frank Thorne, Frank Thorne's birthday is June 16th. Now stick that in your comic art metaphysics and smoke
it. That's one of them really important weekends, isn't it?
It's and you don't know that until later on. That not only do all of these episodes take place simultaneously, but in terms of the longevity, 50 years later, all of these people are still engaged in this same profession, this same professional capacity, and had no idea about each other, and certainly had no idea that this is where they were going in 1972, that's why, I talk about God's clockwork mechanism. It's like 50 years for God is a cosmological eye blink. He built everything so that it goes like this, so that you do get these confluences, and where a confluence like that occurs, the odds are it's going to go on a very fixed, regular, elliptical trajectory that matches that of any planet or any moon or any asteroid.
Right.